Thanks everybody for hanging out in the audience. On this side, my apologies for seeing my best side, I guess. My apologies for that. You'll be seeing the side. And do you want me to get this out of the way? Can you see okay? You okay? Thank you. Bob Breen, we want to give you guys a nice plug from Armor Pro and your staff for making this sound so good tonight. Rogers is also, please give him a nice round of applause. Rogers is recording this, and you know what? With the first half, no editing. I think it's going to be needed. Everybody did such a great job with. We had 20 of the 29 candidates. I think we had 27 or 28 that were able to make it this evening. So thanks to everybody who was here. But we're now getting into the candidates running for mayor. We have great questions. We did a survey. And it was all over the city, and we got some terrific questions. And we narrowed it down to 9, and we thought we'd bring in some really good people to help ask these questions. Ryan Erb from the United Way, Nancy Orr, who's been so good at looking at the housing situation and what's affecting housing. She's been studying this for a long time. And from St. Mike's, Ella McCone is here as well. So we're going to be getting them to ask our candidates some questions. And we're going to be starting it off this evening. First names, I guess alphabetically first names. So Kathy gets to start things off, and we'll give you a few minutes, 2 minutes to at least explain your platform, and then we'll get into the questions, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Kathy, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I was born in Toronto and raised in Oro Medonte. My parents were Greek immigrants who came to Canada after World War II. They ran a family farm and they owned a restaurant. I'm educated as a biochemist and have worked as a project manager for preclinical drug development, as a technical writer, a due diligence reviewer, and a consultant. We moved to Stratford 19 years ago, knowing it would be an ideal community to raise our children. My educational background in science gives me a solid foundation in problem solving and evidence-based decision making. Recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic will require a clear vision for the future, one that addresses the challenges created by 3 years of disruption. Recovery is not just about pandemic recovery, though. It's not the only challenge we face as a community. Housing, infrastructure, the climate crisis, geopolitical instability, and more add to the complexity of the issues that affect our community. My vision for Stratford is where every resident and visitor experiences a high quality of life. Live, work, play communities are sustainable and stable communities. They're stable environmentally, financially, and socially. I'm running to lead an effective council that is solutions-based and highly collaborative. During my time on council, I've been the chair of several boards and committees, and this has given me the opportunity to develop the leadership skills that I think are required to go from councillor to mayor. I was first elected to Stratford City Councillor in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. I've been a member of the Finance and Labour Relations Subcommittee, Heritage and Planning Subcommittee. I was Vice Chair of the Social Services Committee and Chair of the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee. I've represented Stratford City Council on community advisory boards, including Huron-Perth Public Health, Social Research and Planning Council, Active Transportation Advisory Committee, Spruce Lodge and Nonprofit Housing, Stratford Perth Housing Corporation, Gallery Stratford, and a number of others. A few examples of my leadership experience. I chaired the steering committee for Stratford Welcomes Refugees. I was a board member of the Ontario Municipal Water Association, and we were involved with projects about COVID-19 wastewater surveillance, and I co-authored an OMWA position paper on removing lead from water. My approach to decision making has always been to read all the relevant documents, do additional research where needed, consider different viewpoints, and ask questions to make an informed decision. It's important to consider the opinions that come to council. However, I find it equally important to ask who is not at the table, who deserves representation. In the end, the decisions should serve the public interest and improve the quality of life of every citizen of Stratford. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And my error, thankfully Leslie and Gwen have me on. It's 3 minutes we're giving each candidate, so Thanks, Kathy, for catching that too. Next up, Martin Ritzma, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Eddie. Good evening. Let me share a little of my life experiences and how they shaped me and defined who I am. My mom and dad emigrated from the Netherlands post-war 1949 at the age of 19. Landing at Pier 21, Halifax, they journeyed by rail to Manitoba, sponsored by a farmer. My dad still says that he chose Canada because the soldiers were humble boys. 2 years after landing in Canada, they bought their first farm in Matheson, Northern Ontario. This is where I was born, and I am the middle of 11 children. Many family issues had us moved many times. South Mountain, Eastern Ontario, was a defining location for our family. My mom died of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, at the age of 37 when I was almost 9. The youngest was 18 months and the oldest was 15 years. That same year, our dairy barn burnt and we lost everything. At 12, we moved to Kitchener and shortly after to a farm just north of Stratford. Catherine always reminds me that good things come out of the bad, and I think she was referring to me meeting her at Stratford Northwestern. The family problems continued with domestic violence, poverty, mental health issues, and CAS became involved. I was blessed to be taken in by a Mennonite family in our community. Catherine and I attended the University of Windsor, where we both played basketball. Post-university, Catherine began her law career, and I started farming and teaching. We have 2 amazing children. Benjamin and his wife, Lindsay, are doctors in Kingston, and Jillian is an emergency doctor at Markham Stouffville, and her husband, Cal, who she met in law school, is a lawyer. We have 4 beautiful granddaughters, Frances, Marion, Ava, and Lucy. Since my mom's death to ALS, I have lost 5 siblings to ALS and 1 nephew. This Christmas, we have lost a niece, Caitlin, to ALS. I've been blessed to have had a 37-year career in education, 21 years as a teacher, 15 as a secondary school administrator, and a year and a half at our board office. Coaching was a big part of my educational career at high school and university. Another amazing way to impact the lives of youth. I often told teachers that kids don't care what you know until they know that they know you care. We moved to our present farm in 1995 and were annexed into the city of Stratford in 2006. I have served on council for 12 years and as your deputy mayor for the past 8 years. Chairing the Planning and Heritage Committee for the past 8 years has been a very rewarding experience. I trust this evening will give you a deeper understanding.
Thank you, Martin. Try to keep it to 3 minutes, and then we can get into the questions, and we'll explain that order in just a little bit. Last up from our candidates, Robert Ritz, you've got 3 minutes.
How is everybody tonight? Good evening. My name is Ritz, Robert Ritz, and I'm running for the mayor of the city of Stratford. People are asking me, why are you running when you're not a politician? I'm running because I care about my hometown and concerned that our city has been labeled with the embarrassing title of Canada's most secretive municipality. This election is a great opportunity for change, with 5 open seats on council and no incumbent mayor. Without change at the top, council will continue to do the same old thing. I believe that a member of our past council should not be rewarded with a promotion to mayor because it'll just bring more of what we've had in this city. I'm the choice for change, a change to lead council with a transparent and engaged with the community. As an architect, I've been working in this city for the last 35 years with 4 mayors and their respective councillors. I have good understanding of how City Hall works, and I have a good relationship with the staff that makes this city function. There's no question I am ready to be the mayor of this city. What makes a good leader? A person who listens and can work with people of all walks of life. My job as an architect is to listen and engage with clients, and with their trust, provide a building that suits their needs. This same skill is important for the role of mayor, in that I have a client base of 34,000 people, a building committee of 10 councillors, and it's our job to provide the home that you, the citizens of this city, want. We have great opportunities in front of us, but we also have some challenges. Tackling these will require that all of us work together, and with someone at City Hall with a creative difference, someone who will be more respectful of citizens, more focused on working together and building trust, this city will move forward with respectful and responsible growth by making Stratford more sustainable, building more affordable housing, address and assist citizens impacted by addiction and homelessness, invest in a more resilient infrastructure, and develop the GTR site. We need to make sure our growth is fed by a healthy tourism and a strong, diverse economic base. I don't come to this race knowing all the answers, but I come with the willingness to work hard and to be honest and open with citizens, and to listen and consult broadly and deeply to make sure our decisions reflect the opinions of all of us. People value trust. That's why I'm running for mayor, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. I'm offering you a clear choice between the same old and a new direction, a change of culture and approach at City Hall. Get engaged. Stay engaged. My name is Robert Ritz, and I'm your choice for mayor of the City of Stratford. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, we're going to engage with our guests who will be asking some questions. So first question is going to go to Kathy. We'll let you respond. We'll give Robert then a chance for 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes to respond, and then Martin, you can jump in anytime you like, and then we'll move down the chain that way. So the first question, Nancy, we'll get you to ask the first question. Nancy will address it to Kathy, and then Robert, you'll get a chance to respond.
Thanks, Eddie. So we're starting with a big one. Our community continues to grow and expand, but we're challenged with needed housing achievable for our citizens. How will you address this? How will you address this need? And in turn, how will you also continue to ensure strong commercial opportunities and expansion in the future?
Thank you. I think first and foremost, I think we have to actually look at what is environmentally and financially stable growth. And I think growth within the built boundary of the city is the smartest from both of those perspectives. Environmentally, it makes absolutely no sense to be growing into farmland or using greenfield for development. I think we have to use all the land that we have that's already serviced and within our built boundary. I think in terms of housing compact growth and building up is a lot smarter than building out into farmland. And I say that obviously for the environmental reasons and climate change, but also fiscally. Ottawa did a study where they looked at the cost of actually growing outside their built boundary and at the cost of growing within their built boundary. And what they found was whenever you built outside the built boundary, the cost of doing so, the cost of building outside of the built boundary, and then also providing services outside of that was a net loss to your tax base every year of several $100s, I think $400. Then when they looked at what happens if we actually build within the built boundary, it was about $600 net gain to your tax levy. So what that allows you to do is that if you grow within your built boundary and you grow up and you do compact growth, you build livable cities, you improve active transportation, you allow people to use transit, and you also add to your tax base that you can then use for things like social services, keeping taxes low, affordability, community services. You can start to use that money to create the kinds of spaces that the citizens can use. And I think that's where we start. We start with compact growth within our built boundary.
Okay, thank you, Robert. We'll give you 2 minutes to respond, and then we'll open it up for a 3-minute debate after that.
Well, first off, it starts by building trust with the citizens and not fighting with with opposition of advocacy groups who have not been consulted on issues that affect them. You got to work with what's around you in this area. The city, to grow, and Kathy's correct, you have to build within the built boundary. But you have to do it in a very respectful way. And we have to recognize the heritage value that this city has. That's the reason people choose to live in Stratford, is that there's this ambiance that Kitchener, Waterloo, London don't have that we have in this city. And it begins on our heritage corridors as they lead into our heritage area in downtown Stratford. Use existing buildings and and because existing buildings are good for the planet in that they have embodied carbon in them, let's use it, let's insulate them, and let's intensify them with respect to density. I think I'm fine with that.
Martin, do you want to jump in
So-
on this? We'll open
so-
it up 3 minutes for
Thank
debate.
you.
Right
So a couple of things. So when I visit students at the secondary school level, I ask them two questions. What's your biggest dream and what's your greatest fear? And the answer is the same. Their biggest dream is to own their own home, to have their own housing, but their biggest fear is not being able to afford it or find it. So certainly the increase in density is so important. I live on a farm that has been annexed. We haven't developed it, and nor do we wish to develop it. But that density is important, and as Robert mentioned, that infill piece is so important, but it must be done in a respectful fashion, keeping in mind the housing in the area that currently exists. The other opportunity that I think that's great is the city core and the former Grand Trunk Railroad shops. I think can serve as a big part where we can have housing that is smaller, but allow people to walk to many of the daily activities that they want to take part in, whether it's work, whether it's recreational activities. The other piece that we are seeing more and more uptake in our community is the adding of granny flats to existing homes to allow individuals to stay where they can be supported and therefore taking less stress or taking more stress off our social system. So with regards to the gateway communities, I think that's where we need to build housing that is higher density and more vertical.
Okay.
Because as an agriculture area, as a farmer, I value that land.
Yeah, that brings up a great point, and I'll throw this out to any of you. You don't want to have land annexed. Do we then go up? Do we go out? And we've got heritage to deal with.
We
in this whole thing.
intensify with what you have that is built, and you may add a little bit to it because you want to respect the neighbors in that neighborhood with that kind of intensification. But the other thing is, I've presented to this council, or this Planning and Heritage Committee, an idea to build a apartment building and parking garage in downtown Stratford, and was turned down on that. Well, that's true intensification, building on land that we own as a city for additional residences. And also, you don't tear down buildings like council approved at Queen and Tro because it's not good for the planet and it's not good for our heritage character.
Okay,
And to that end, the
What's that?
Cooper site is a perfect spot for that.
Yeah, okay, and Kathy?
Environmentally dependent.
Kathy, you want to add?
So I just want to talk a little bit about how we get from A to B, because it's really important to think about. I think a couple of the ways that we can address some of those concerns is we really do need to actually create some infill development guidelines. And we will have infill. Any way that you look at it, if we're going to build within the built boundary and if we're going to actually build up and intensify, we're going to need those infill development guidelines that make sure that whatever is built suits the neighborhood as much as possible.
Okay, define intensify.
So intensify means that if you have 1 unit per whatever square
Yeah.
area, you do 2 or you do 3. So it's like if you go from a single family home to a duplex or a triplex, how do you make sure that you have infill design guidelines that
Yeah.
actually help drive that? The other part is through the official plan, making sure that the official plan is actually updated and it's coming up in the next year. Make sure it's updated so we identify those areas for growth
Right.
so everyone knows what's coming.
Okay, Robert, you wanted to add?
Well, it sort of contradicts what you approved, Kathy. Martin was with the neighbors on the Queen Tro site where we're tearing down buildings, building brand new stacked townhouses along that strip with the potential through the official plan, a 6-story apartment building. Well, that doesn't really help the ambiance of the city of Stratford for people that come and visit.
Well,
and
we've
those
seen
who
that.
choose.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I was just going to say that it wasn't the potential for 6 stories. It was site-specific zoning that would be 3.5 stories. And I actually will,
Official plan is 6-story, 18 meters.
But the official plan, it's the zoning, it's the site-specific zoning that actually allows what is going to be allowed there, and it's specific. So
Okay.
the other part is, I will not apologize for that, for having approved that. I thought it was good infill development, and I think it's fine.
We
The
may come back to
developer-
that. We may come back to that if we have time. We're going to move on to, that's the first question. We're going to get on to our second question, and we'll address this to Martin first from Ella, and you wanted to talk a bit about public transit.
What are the largest opportunities for public transit in Stratford and area? And does the current system serve its intended demographic?
That's a great question, and thank you. And from a student, that's an important question, and I'll get to that. So I'm extremely proud of the public transit system in Stratford, both our regular busing and the parallel transit system, and the men and women that serve our users. I am proud of the new transit hub away from City Hall, and it will become even more important as we develop the Grand Trunk shops. I am proud of the investment that we make into public transit. Whether you're a user or not, we all benefit from its existence. I think the system does serve our intended users. However, the pandemic has decreased ridership, but it certainly will improve. I believe that continued improvement can be made to expand our ridership. As a high school principal, I was so happy to see hundreds of students arrive safely to our schools on public transit. I like the work that our transit department has done to enhance the number of people that we serve through our transit on demand model. Our staff continue to respond to recommendations of our ridership to improve this program and other aspects of the system. I would like, however, to go back to a citizen-based public transit advisory board to continue to bring recommendations forward. I like what we've done to increase both the number of shelters as well as improving the bus shelter facilities. The installation of barrier-free shelters with solar to power electronic devices needs to continue. Our next big step is the electrification of our busing system.
15 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, we'll give you 2 minutes to respond to that.
Okay, a lot of good things are happening with Stratford Transit, but one of the things that I recognized when we actually first moved to Stratford was that there's a culture here where the people who ride the bus are the people who are students, seniors, or people who don't own cars. And I think what we really need to do is actually find novel ways to get actually more people riding the bus and riding public transit. I rode public transit to go to work for years when we lived in Toronto, and everyone rode the bus, everyone rode the TTC. And I think if we could actually encourage more ridership and normalize riding the bus for families, I think that would go a long way to actually improving the system, right? More riders means more revenue. More revenue means more, improving routes, things like that. And so I think one of the things we have to look at is there are some communities that are actually piloting free transit on the weekends. And I think weekends are the time where you're actually not doing a lot of cost recovery in your transit system, but you might be able to actually, if you're not getting the kids to soccer and trying to get to work and doing all the things that you do, that it's convenient to hop in the car, but you use the transit system on the weekends for those errands or those trips that maybe you don't have a time crunch on, then you start to learn how the system works, how well it works. We went down to one car recently and I rode transit for about 4 or 5 months, and it was great. It worked really well for me. Would I have chosen to do so when I had my car sitting there ready? Probably not. So I think we need to actually shift away from a car culture into actually using transit, not all the time, but at least some of the time. And I think that's certainly good for our roads, and it's good for the environment, especially as we electrify.
Yeah. We'll open it up for debate. Robert, did you have any response?
Well, just an aside for me is I drove Stratford Transit buses as a student back many years ago. And at that time, we had dial-a-ride transit. And I find with transit on demand, you have to go to a bus stop to be picked up. In dial-a-ride, we went door to door. So imagine you have your groceries, you got to walk to the bus stop, get on the bus. When you get off, you got to then walk to your next destination. Dial-a-ride transit is more convenient. I think we have to look at the convenience, because if you want to fill the empty buses, you have to make it convenient. You have to have more frequent times so that as in the TTC, there's one coming by every 10 or 15 minutes. And on off hours, maybe go to a different type of system. Okay. So yes, it definitely needs people's involvement to help us with the answer.
With that in mind, what are the stats right now? Is ridership up or is it down? How is the transit on demand working?
certainly the ridership is down, but that's a reflection of the pandemic, and certainly it will increase. The one piece that I want to share with the audience that perhaps hasn't been discussed is the aspect or the transit connection system within our region,
Yes.
where people can take a bus at a reduced rate into Stratford, whether it's for shopping, whether it's for accessing services that they need, or to work. And that is good for our environment. Individuals from Stratford can as well take that same service to as far as London and Kitchener to instead of using a car.
But isn't it kind of like and I'll get to Kathy in just a sec, isn't it kind of like Go Transit and Via where it's not convenient? It's great that we've got Go Transit that's going to Toronto, it's now a 4-hour trip.
Well,
Kathy?
And so I would argue
And
that,
Robert.
yeah, one of the things that we need to look at is working with other levels of government and working with other regional governments, because we have little bits and pieces of a connected transit system, but we're not actually there yet where we can have frequent, all day transit that is connected, commuters even from Kitchener, Waterloo, or from London. We're just not there yet.
Are we subsidizing it?
It is being subsidized for the province. It's a pilot project, so use it or lose it, everyone. If you really like that regional transit, you really have to start riding it. But part of that is it's like a chicken and egg. I actually think if they created more, if we put more money into more frequent and more convenient transit, the people will come. Demanding it the other way around is, I think, wrong on the part of the province and the feds.
Robert?
True, you have to have times that work because when it arrives in Stratford, it doesn't line up with work schedules of people that might be coming from Milverton or Mitchell or wherever.
Yeah. Martin, wrapping up for us?
And once again, I want to go back. There are so many good answers in this community, particularly for the people that use transit. And that's where I think it would be of value for us to go back to a citizens-based transit committee that can carry those suggestions and information forward.
Okay. We're going to go back to Nancy to ask the next question. And we were touching on a little bit, just job vacancies that we have, and that may have something to do with transportation as well. Nancy.
Thanks, Eddie. So what is your plan to address the high percentage of job vacancies we currently have in our city?
And we'll pose this to Robert, and Martin, you get a 2-minute response. Robert, she's all yours.
Ready? I flipped my schedule around here, sorry. Job vacancies in this city, we have a lot of jobs obviously for people that aren't here. One of the methods, the short-term solution would be to maybe arrange to have busing to bring them in from other communities where they can gather and then come into the city. But the bigger picture is housing, and we need more affordable and attainable housing where it's in an income bracket where they can go. And the idea for that would be to develop a Stratford Property Development Corporation where we use our own property that the city owns and develop it using Stratford builders to provide homes that are 1,000 square feet, 3-bedroom. And if we are the developer, if we own the land, that saves about 30 to 40% off of the regular price of a home, because that's the portion that the developer and land costs are. So if we become the developer, that person's gone. If we have the land, that's gone. And then with that housing, then we have places for people to live, and then they will come and work in the city, and then we can start looking at more industrial expansion in this city.
Robin says we're about 10 years away from actually catching up to what housing is needed. Martin, did you want to respond?
Certainly, and I'll pick up on the housing piece. Certainly, we are in a spot where we see housing being built in our area. We know we need that housing. Individuals want to work in Stratford and want to live in Stratford. But two other things that I want to talk about with regards to the job vacancy, that is around education and about training and retraining. I've been blessed in my educational career to encourage young men and women to take technical study courses so that they can go on and do apprenticeship and programs and see the skilled trades, which we are desperately in need of. We rely on skilled trade from immigration, but we need to promote skilled trades in our schools. and I'm proud that I've done that. The other organization that's so key in our community, maybe not heard of a lot, that responds to the needs of our community is that of the Technical Training Group, where this organization find out what the community needs, and then trains and retrains individuals for those jobs.
Okay. Kathy, we'll pose this then to you. Is this the triangle where this all comes down to housing, transportation, and a living wage?
Yes, and that's right on my list here.
I was speaking.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the conversations that we need to be having with our employers, and I think the United Way is actually the leader in this, and the work through the Social Research and Planning Council, is to talk to employers of what it takes to be competitive. And this is what it costs for someone to actually be able to live here and have a decent quality of life. And so those should be the wages that you're paying, because it can actually be a bit of a vicious cycle if the city gets into the business of actually building housing to meet a need for a low wage workforce. That's not acceptable either, because that becomes on the backs of the tax levy, and your residential tax base is subsidizing businesses that probably should be having a conversation about what it takes to be competitive in this area.
Okay, Robert, you wanted to respond.
The plan would be that it doesn't affect, my idea would not affect the tax base because it'd be independent, similar to Festival Hydro, where it's a corporation owned by the city that develops the land outside of our tax base, and they have property that we already own. They would manage it the way any other development group would, only it's our land, and we skip the developer on our side of things with Stratford Home Builders building the buildings.
Okay. Martin or Kathy?
I was just going to say,
Martin first.
I'll jump in here, and this might come along later on in our conversation, but we're in the throes in Stratford of working with a partnership with engineering, with a consulting firm, on a project to develop attainable housing. And this will come up later on, but part of our responsibility as a city, if we own land, we need to be at the table with those partners, with the construction people, and provide land for attainable housing. And if we're at the table and we're providing the land, then we get to dictate what type of housing is being built.
Well, because, I see Stratford already building out past the Rotary Complex, and we're talking about homes, $800,000.
Yeah.
And
It's okay.
So I was going to say, and a lot of those homes, that the decisions around those homes were baked in long before a lot of us were actually on council. So we have to be looking to the future. So we really have to pay attention when the official plan gets updated coming up. But I would say that the city already has a really good track record of building city-owned housing on city-owned property, and I think we should continue that. I think the Britannia Street apartments are a really good example of what we can do when council decides to keep its own land and task city staff with actually building housing that is affordable.
Because we get calls at the chamber office from people out of town saying, I'd love to work in Stratford, but I can't afford to live here. And I'm sure it's not just a Stratford problem.
No.
Anyways, we've got our next question coming up, and Ryan Erb is going to be asking this one. We'll pose this one to Kathy, and we'll let Robert respond to this. Ryan, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Kathy and everyone, what do you think is the largest issue facing seniors in our community, and what are your plans to address it?
I'm going to take a stab at doing two different things, because affordability and cost of living and being able to stay in your own home is a big issue for seniors. I think there's other levels of government that are responsible for some of this, and they need to step up as well as us. But the other part of it is also quality of life here. So we keep reading all the time about how Stratford is a great place to retire, right? We see those, articles all the time. And it is a great place to retire if you can afford to do so. But it's also a good place to retire because it has a great hospital, it has a great park system, it has good restaurants, it has lots of things that you can do. And I would argue every single one of those things requires people. And it requires people who are either young individuals or young families. And so I think if you are a senior or close to being a senior in this community, as I am, we should be looking to finding ways to make sure that our community actually attracts more young people and young families. They're going to be our nurses, our doctors, our parks workers, the restaurant, the people who, work at the restaurants, the people that work at the theater and at the festival. We need to support those people so that they can live, work, and play here, because what happens 10 years from now when it's only seniors who can afford to move here? It isn't going to actually provide them with all of those things that every single newspaper article says it's a great place to retire.
Yeah, and it really was. There was a report that said Stratford, I think, is the fourth most popular place in Ontario to retire to. So we do have that graying economy. Robert, we'll let you back it up here.
It's a place to retire because of the quality of life. The heritage value of this city is an attraction for them as well. But the thing is, to bring in young people, it's coming back down to housing, and not city-assisted housing, just affordable housing through different means. The official plan is being amended. The idea of the corporation is something that's to be reviewed with council. It's a new story here regarding this attainable housing group. Again, it's sort of new, it's out there, it's in there. Where was the engagement with the community before that started and was developed sort of on its own? That's a bit concerning. With respect to seniors, finding long-term care. When my mom was near the end of life, is there a room available in a local nursing home, a long-term care home? Are they going to move them and put them out in Seaforth or another smaller community where it is a half-hour drive, and in the winter and it might be their last night and you don't get out there because of the roads? It would be nice to have more of that in this city. And again, we can focus on that, but again, keep it outside of the taxpayers' bill.
Okay, Martin?
So a couple things. When I talk to seniors, certainly housing that they can move into prior to retirement. They are keen on leaving their large family homes and make room for the young families that want to move in. But the other couple things that I want to address, the idea of isolation, the idea of transportation. We've done an amazing job, and United Way is certainly front and center. And you as citizens supporting United Way, that supports agencies that help those seniors that want to stay in their own home, but do struggle with transportation and isolation. The other piece that I want to go back to is the Grand Trunk shops. I envision a place where our seniors can live, be active, and have a sense of belonging and have all the amenities in walking distance at the Grand Trunk shops. That is an ideal location that I do really believe that that's going to be an answer to a lot of those issues, whether it's a smaller footprint for the senior to live in, whether it's them walking to all the amenities and feeling less isolated.
All the amenities could be there. That, and I'll get to Kathy in just a sec, that area, if I'm not mistaken, the Grand Trunk, the Old Cooper site, is larger than the downtown core itself. Am I correct about that?
And not only that is the number of pieces of land that are on the periphery that are waiting for that development.
So to be developed, and Kathy, you wanted to add to that.
So I just wanted to add that the province controls long-term care beds, and so I think it's really important to remember that the council does advocate and should continue to advocate quite strongly for us having more long-term care beds here. I want to talk a little bit about the model, though, of long-term care. I really like the idea of continuum of care facilities, similar to what you have at Greenwood Court, or you would have Woodland Towers and Spruce Lodge. Now, Woodland Towers and Spruce Lodge is the municipal care home, but the idea that couples, you have a continuum of care where you can have retirement apartments where people can live independently, but then you also have a continuum of care where if one of the two of a couple, let's say, has to go to long-term care, they can actually stay together in the same complex and not be separated. And I realize the rules around that actually come from the province, but I think the more that we can encourage that continuum of care model of aging is really, really important. And I really think that that splitting couples up is something that we should be advocating.
But then we're going around in a circle because we're coming to long-term care and for health care and hiring and trying to get people to come to work here for what could be low wages in that. Robert, we'll end it with you if there's anything you wanted to add.
The part of the issue too for seniors is entertainment and what they are doing. And when the Tom Patterson Theatre happened, we weren't set up quickly enough to transfer them. They weren't brought into the storyline that the theater was going to expand, and facilities right now are a little light. COVID might be an issue why the numbers are down, but also the inconvenience of coming up here. For some people, it's 2 bus rides.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to the next question, and Ryan, we wanted to ask about mat tax, and we'll throw this one to Martin, and Robert will let you respond.
The municipal accommodation tax was recently approved. Can you speak to its implementation and how it can or could be used?
Thank you. And certainly I will begin by saying that I am in support of the municipal accommodation tax. I believe that it will be a great source of revenue for our city. When I travel to places like Kingston, I am required to pay this tax. I believe tourists will continue to come to Stratford with the understanding of them paying the tax. Our biggest challenge, and this is reflected in your tax levy, is that around infrastructure. We know that as municipalities, we own 60% of the infrastructure. But we also know we have access to 10% of the funds to pay for those infrastructure, whether it's repairs or new build. Our tourists, when I'm a tourist, I'm using infrastructure. And as tourists come to Stratford, the 1.5 million that come to Stratford, they are utilizing our infrastructure. And those tax dollars, or that MAT taxes can go towards covering the cost of infrastructure or supporting the cost of infrastructure, and then in turn, reduce your tax levy.
Robert, you wanted to respond? You've got 2 minutes.
The issue with the mat tax is the process again. Like when it came about, they didn't go out to the stakeholders, the B&Bs, the hotels, and you get this kickback of citizens that are upset with the tax. And the process, they brought them in at the very beginning, explaining what it's all about, why we're doing it, how it's going to help us with cost of infrastructure, et cetera, the shortfalls. They might have been on board and they would have owned it, because when you work with somebody to help make a decision, they will own the decision with you.
Kathy will throw this, because with the mat tax, a lot of people are questioning if it's 4% now, how do we know it's not going to be 6% or whatever the next year? And how, do we know how the funds will be administered?
So back to answering the question that was posed is that we have the mat tax, it's 4%. Half of it has to be by legislation, provincial legislation has to be spent on tourism marketing, so that's fine. The other half is where the mat tax, like all other fees that the city, garbage, parking fees, development charges, permit fees, even the gas tax that we get, those all have to have a reserve fund that actually where that money goes, and they have to have a very defined reserve policy that outlines how that's going to be spent. And I think that's really important, because that's the stage we are at right now with the city, that we are developing a reserve policy on how that money is going to be spent. And it's a really great opportunity to start to look at the kinds of things that we can spend that money on and be very prescriptive and proactive about it. And so it can be things that are both good for visitors and residents. It can support both. And so I don't know exactly all of the different ways that money can be spent. That's a conversation we're having right now, and we should have with the community. But I do know that it offers a really great opportunity to do some really great things for the community, whether it's around community services, whether it's around parkland, whether it's around housing, whether it's around roads, because the tourists use the roads as we do, and some of them are a little rough. But we have a really, I know, John Street, yes, I know, I rode it on my bike last week. But I think this is important. It's a really great time. And this is the other part. Once you have a reserve fund and a reserve policy, when it comes to budget time, you know how you can spend that money, right?
Does somebody administer, because if it's 4%, is there an administration fee? So it may be 3%.
Well, I think part of the thing is that you have to think is all of these is staff time.
How do we look at that? And does somebody administer the administrator? That makes sense.
Well, guess you could ask the same question around our parking fees and our
Right.
parking officers and our permit fees and our permit officers and all of those. Yes.
Okay.
But how many people,
Robert first and then Martin.
how many citizens are involved in the process? Like, this stuff's happening at City Hall, but how many people that are stakeholders in this, where's their involvement? And that's what I'm looking for. There should be more citizen engagement here, the people that are going to be affected by this tax.
Martin, we'll let you wrap it up here.
Yeah, and certainly, I'm going to touch on what Kathy just mentioned there. Our staff is a trustworthy staff, and full disclosure will be part of what they do. The policy will be developed, and it will fully disclose the amount of money coming in and how it's being utilized.
It's engagement after the fact.
Okay. Next question. Alderman Cohn, did you want to ask this one? And this is about emissions. And I'm sorry, we'll throw this to Robert, and Martin, you'll get to respond, and then we'll open it up for debate. Sorry.
Do you believe emissions reduction targets of 30% by 2030 and net zero by 2050 are enough? And what steps are you intending to take to better implement the greenhouse gas reduction plan and the One Planet Living principles in Stratford?
Are they enough? Well, we should probably be there already because the planet we're going a little far the wrong way, is my personal belief. As an architect, our Architects Association decided their systems were at end of life, and 10 years ago, and what we've done as an association, we revamped the building to the point where we are almost off the grid. We are not carbon fueled at all. Our energy bill for a 24,000 square foot, 3-story office building was $46 in the month of March. As a city, we should lead by example with the buildings we have that have equipment that's coming to end of life. And part of that process is to replace it with non-carbon fueled appliances, and also insulate and upgrade windows and tighter air filtration on the building. And that's the way to solve the problem. So if we lead by example with our many houses that we own and show the citizens how it can be done, then the citizens will jump on board and join us in making it work to help the planet continue, and that my grandchildren can live on a planet without wearing a mask full-time, giving them oxygen.
Okay. Martin, you've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, and so your question, it depends on the population you ask. I was at a youth rally with regards to climate change, and one of the banners said, "We are effed."
Yeah.
Like, we are in trouble. And so that depends on who you're talking to. But I want to go back to solutions. And I believe the municipality, and we are taking good steps. Do I believe it's enough right now? No, I don't believe so. But municipalities need to make the work and the investments of reducing greenhouse emissions part of their annual and long-term budgets. We have to build it in. We have to continue to employ individuals that will carry that work forward, and that is their responsibility. It's not part of somebody's many tasks, and it might sit on the corner of the desk, and it might get attended to. But the investment in staff that work with the city, work in conjunction with other municipalities, needs to be part of what we're doing moving forward.
Okay. Kathy, do you want to respond to that?
I was just going to say the city's taken a few really good steps in terms of hiring a climate change manager to take responsibility for this. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but in our budgeting process, there's a line about how this impacts, will it impact climate change? We often see that in the staff reports. Staff have certainly taken on the task of looking for ways to do things better. I think that, we do need to, I think wilding is a really interesting idea where you just let things grow, but then the public doesn't understand why you're letting things grow. So then we need an education campaign on, we're going to cut less grass because longer grass is better for the environment. Fleet conversion to electrical, that's important. New buildings, any new buildings the city builds should actually be built to net zero, and any building we're renovating should have all of those things built in. But I think the bigger part of it too is also that we always have to remember that climate change and COVID, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. So while we can lead with example, we also have to find ways to make sure that it isn't an economic burden to to people who can't afford to retrofit their houses.
Right.
We have to make climate change adaptation equitable, right?
Can we climate change, the wartime homes, the heritage buildings that we've got downtown? How do you do that without changing those around?
Well, and I believe that's where the individual comes in. And once again, it depends on that individual's capacity to do that. And sometimes we have to incentivize.
At what expense, though? Because
Yes,
that
well, yeah, exactly. And so on a personal basis, I have geothermal, and I could afford to do that. So I don't use oil. We are set for a solar panel of 20 units on our barn. Not everybody can do that. But I think individuals can do the small purposeful things, whether it's a small unit on their home. And I believe that the municipality needs to support that and be actively involved in trying to cover the costs or help support the costs for people that want to do those good things.
Right. Well, I'll use one example, and Robert, you might be able to comment on this one, is the old oven crest. We used to call it oven crest because it was so hot in there. But it would cost so much to refurbish that hospital, that building, would it not?
Well, new construction and renovation construction costs are about the same, but you save the embodied carbon by not tearing a building down like Avon Crest, and you can make it energy efficient, throw panels on the roof, and the deal is that the money you save on carbon fuels, and they've gone up in price, is what makes it affordable to transition over to something that's more sustainable.
Right. And the last word to you, Martin.
Absolutely. And we need to change our mindset, our philosophy. We need to see caring about our environment as an economic benefit and not a burden.
Okay, good stuff. Nancy, we'll go back to you for the next question. This will be addressed to Kathy with Martin to respond. It's about the cyber attack.
Thanks, Eddie. So regarding the June 2019 cyber attack on the city, how well equipped do you think we are to deal with future attacks?
I would like to say that I have a definitive answer for that, and I simply don't. The hackers are we are as prepared as we can be in working with our insurer, working with our IT department, but if anybody tells you that we know what 3 years from now the hackers are going to be able to do, know how to do, or the people issues around it are going to be, I think anybody who knows, who says they know, probably doesn't know. And I think that's one of the challenges is, right? I think it happens when you think you've got everything covered. So I think in my mind, it should be a constant looking at the systems, seeing where other places have run into trouble, because it's every day there's a new one. And what you learn from them, it's going to be iterative, it's going to be constant. And while I'd like to say it'll never happen again, I don't think anyone can tell you that's the truth, because that is the global challenge that we have now. The bigger challenge that we have is the cost of insurance and the cost of taking care of it when it happens. We have a lot of small, I think about a lot of like the health units, the long-term care homes, hospitals, schools, municipalities. The cost of sort of mitigating against the effects of these cyber attacks are escalating. And I think unless the province and the feds come up with something that actually can help us out, it's going to become cost prohibitive. And I think that's where my concern lies, is we will do as much as we can, but what happens when the cost is too much?
Martin, you've got 2 minutes to respond.
Certainly. And I believe our staff did an exceptional job with our last cyber attack. And to echo Kathy's words, are we ever going to prevent it? No. But we can do things to lessen the impact and the likelihood of it of happening. Education is a great place. Educating our staff and our city council about threats around cyber phishing and what we need to do to respond to that. And our IT department does a great job of regular updates on these are things we're looking for. Also, the idea of working with insurance companies and experts in the field. We need to invest in both the insurance and the best technology available in order to lessen that chance, because to prevent it totally is not likely, but certainly we need to protect our facilities, our infrastructure, and the personal information of our citizens.
Is there a dollar figure of how much we invest per year to protect our city?
That is a good question, Eddie.
It's the IT budget.
Yes.
Someone-
Anybody from IT here?
We'll pose that.
But it is a good question. But I want to once again remind our residents that our IT department are outstanding individuals that work hard and do what they need to do to lessen the impact. And we certainly can learn from other communities, and we can share what we've had success with. Just recently with St. Mary's, how we've had success on mitigating that big issue.
Robert, how do you do it in the private sector?
How do we do it in the private sector? Well, we're not as big as the city of Stratford, so our vulnerability isn't as great because there's so many people online, and with respect to the city of Stratford staff, as an outsider that uses city staff, there's a lot of, I'm finding, clarification, make sure it's you. We changed an email address. We could not get into City Hall anymore, but I expected that, and I was fine with that. You know, it was good. I actually thought the city did a great job on that with staff, and the cost wasn't all that expensive when you look at it in hindsight and compared, and it's going to happen. It's a global, it's an international issue. It's people outside of us that don't like us, and they're looking to just mess us up. And we just have to rely on our federal government to help all of us with this, because it can happen to you at home.
Yeah. Kathy, did you want to back up anything, or we'll move on to the next one? No? All done? We'll go to Ryan for the next one. This will be addressed to Martin, and Kathy will let you have 2 minutes to respond about homelessness.
Homelessness is a growing challenge in our city. If elected, what will you do to respond?
It is, and certainly we don't have the monopoly on homelessness. It's a local issue, it's a national issue, it is a global issue. Once again, we need to form partnerships. We need to form partnerships with organizations like United Way. I know with my work personally with Stratford Perth ShelterLink, I've worked for 23 years with homeless youth in addressing, these are youth that are 16 to 24, and that don't choose to be homeless. And part of the next step, and we'll talk about this with the Connection Center as well, is trying to develop affordable, attainable housing, because some of those young men and women are ready now to step beyond ShelterLink into their own home, into their own housing. So it's working in conjunction with organizations like United Way, that we can support the agencies that can do that work. The other piece that I'm going to mention here quickly is the Connection Center, and that's the first step of moving people into permanent housing. And certainly we'll come back after my colleagues have had a chance to talk to this.
Okay. Kathy, you got 2 minutes?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about expansion of the SHOP program, and it's a housing first strategy, and I think it was mentioned earlier, but it is a rapid rehousing strategy where somebody who's experiencing homelessness, when they are at the point where they're ready to actually enter into housing, you find them permanent housing, and you do provide the wraparound supports that they need to actually, because it's not just about attaining housing, it's about retaining it and being able to be stably housed for a long time. We often find that people with high acuity homelessness, that means they have additional things that are going on in their lives, whether it's trauma, addiction, mental health, illness, any number of other things. They need extra supports to be able to retain their retain their housing once they have it, and that's where the SHOP program comes in. But it does require a high level of collaboration across both provincial government giving money and providing funds to the healthcare sector for programming. It involves social service agencies. It involves our social services staff at the City of Stratford that have the outreach workers that have that continual relationship building with with people who are experiencing homelessness. But I think the other part is it requires us to talk to citizens about homelessness so that they actually understand what's involved. And I think that's I joke, you know, people will say, what are you going to do about homeless people? And I say, are you asking me what I'm going to do about the fact that you're having coffee at Market Square and there are people who may be homeless also having coffee at the same time? Because if that's your question, nothing. Because they actually are, you know, they have as much right to sit with their friends at Market Square as everybody else. If you want to ask me how we're going to help those people in terms of doing outreach and talking to them and helping them find permanent housing, we have a long conversation we can have through, you know, collaboration with any number of agencies.
Robert?
Again, go to the people, the experts, the frontline service staff, citizens with lived experience that, you know, engage with these people. And if we do that, have a task force, a mayor's task force to get into it, bring in citizens to know what it's all about, to expand the dialogue and to let everybody know what's actually happening, what's going through their minds, what do they think about with respect to what am I going to do tonight, where am I going to sleep? I know the city of Stratford does take care of the people who are experiencing homelessness. They will always have shelter in this city if needed. And it's going to the people that are involved to help come up with the solutions.
But we're seeing it more and more now, and Martin, we'll bring this up just because we're now seeing people on the corners that are holding signs. We're seeing, you know, tents being set up behind the bus depot.
So a couple things there. One, we need to build relationships with those individuals. They've been marginalized. They've been harmed at some point in their life. And it's more than being homeless. It's addiction. It's poverty. It's all those unignorable issues that we address so well in our community. And so we need to build relationships so they will take that next big step. We had an individual in Stratford that was 1.5 years living rough. Through the Connection Center, took the chance of stepping in and at one point decided, yes, I am going to live in a motel room. Okay? The other piece that's so important is the proactive work with the outreach workers. And I know through the shelter, Stratford Per Shelter Link, we reach out to boys and girls, young men and women that are at risk of being homeless and try to sort things before that homeless piece does happen. But in the end, and I don't have to say this to Stratford, it's responding in a respectful, dignified fashion.
Okay. This deals with mental health, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody else want to?
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
I ran into somebody downtown, a guy I know, he had a rough day busking, and he said, hey, Robert, I haven't had a meal in 2-3 days. I said, have you gone to the Connection Center? And he said, is that local? I said, no, it's at St. Paul's Church. And I said, well, he goes, is it open? I said, well, I'll give you a ride there to see if it's open, because I'm not going to leave you stranded. And sure enough, there were people there, and I'm sure he had a good meal that night and took something home for the next day.
Yeah.
So it was satisfying. And also to be part of that project as the architect who helped design it and develop it, it was rewarding.
Okay. We got 30 seconds. Kathy or Martin?
Oh, I was just going to piggyback on the idea of lived experience. I think it's really important. I think the Social Research and Planning Council has done quite a bit of work on what you call as participatory research, where you make sure that you ask the people who are going to be receiving the services what they need, what they want, what they're hoping to get from it. And it's that idea about building dignity into the process and making sure that people feel safe in having the conversations around that. So I think it is really important that we engage people where they are and when they are ready.
Well, you've got Ryan Erb right here. Nancy's also, you know, so important with what's going on with housing. So great people to talk to afterwards as well. We've got, we'll try to squeeze in one more question before the audience gets to talk to you privately when you go to your respective tables and that. Ella, do you want to ask our final question of the night?
According to the Stratford Police Service, as reported by the Beacon Herald, in 2021, mental health calls increased by 71% and represented the largest type of calls received by Stratford Police. Do you believe the Stratford Police budget should change to better support the community and be representative of the type of calls they are receiving? Or do you believe the Stratford Police has the adequate tools to respond to these types of emergencies?
That one is going to go to Robert, and Kathy will let you wrap it up with a response.
Does the budget have to change? I would say no. What might have to happen is the tools have to be adjusted. And and when I say no, it isn't like if they need money, obviously we're going to provide police services with the money they need to add this to their system, this feature of a social worker as a ride-along. And I know now that they actually do, during the day shifts, have a ride-along for domestic issues. And yeah, the bottom line is adjust your tools and increase as required for it.
Okay, Kathy, you've got 2 minutes to respond.
So not too long ago, I found myself at an event at Optimism Place and the police chief was there, and he reminded me that the very first budget meeting that he came, I asked him, they had the list of city budgets, and the police budget was at the top, and it was a bar graph. And the social services was down here. And I asked the question, how much money would we need to put down here at the social services budget so we can actually eventually decrease the budget that you have? And he remembered that as actually a really good point. And so we had a really interesting conversation about policing and how it's changing. And I honestly think that we have to it's a 2-part question. The first part is, how do we actually put money into social services and community services so that we can actually deal with the upstream causes of why people are actually, finding themselves interacting with police? And once we do that, that's a long-term plan, because I think it starts early. But in the meantime, I think the police services do have to look at, I think officer training is really important so that they know how to do de-escalation. They can recognize mental health calls. I know that the police officers that are going out with the crisis workers from the hospital are learning a lot from them. And I think those are really good things that the police services could be doing so that we can get through the gap between when we start to actually deal with the upstream. So that eventually the police can go back to doing what the police should be doing and not be doing the healthcare calls and all of those things.
Yeah, well, how do we do that? We spent an awful lot of money on that urban assault vehicle, Martin, and so that's where we want to know: can we have police officers back on the street and not have them hiding into that vehicle?
And I do not believe that our police services would oppose money that is being added, it going to another agency. We have an amazing, right now, and it needs to be extended, a program where people that are gifted and trained in the area of de-escalation ride with the police officers. I've seen it firsthand at the shelter where a police officer and that ride along come into a situation and the police officer isn't the first to make that foray into trying to sort and de-escalate.
But how's that conversation going to go with the police department when you're going to say, we'd like to bump up social services?
And I honestly believe that our police force it's front and center in their world every day. And I honestly believe they want to see what's best for our citizens, not what's best for their pocketbook.
Robert?
I agree.
Okay, short and sweet. I like that. Kathy?
I jokingly, we said one time, wouldn't it be great if we could, all of these, mental health, social issues, if we could spend the money upstream so that we didn't need all these other services? And somebody says, but what would happen with all of these people that actually work in policing or social service or something? And so we said, a lot of the people around the table said, we'd be gladly out of a job.
Yes.
And jokingly, one of the men said, I could play jazz full time again. And it's kind of half joking. People do not go into these careers to perpetuate the problems that we have and the challenges that we have. They go into these careers, across the board, all the social services and policing, to help.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong, because
No.
I think one of the greatest things that I love about Stratford is you see the police on bikes and they're interacting with people. I love that sort of.
More police on bikes would be amazing.
Yeah, Martin.
The one thing, there's investment of dollars, but there's also investment in care and compassion. to reduce the stigma. I talked last week in a school, and we talked about reducing that stigma. Youth are now more willing to talk about their challenges, and we are more willing to listen to their challenges. And included in that is our Stratford Police Force.
Thanks, you. Guys, it's, we've come to the end of this. Now we want to do closing comments. We'll start with Robert Ritz. If you can give us 2-minute closing comment, and then we'll work down the table here.
I'm running for mayor because I care about my hometown. The last few years, we've seen all sorts of citizen advocacy groups spring up, Get Concerned, Good Governance, Wise Communities, and groups concerned about the Queen Road development and the GTR site and the potential loss of Avon Crest. Why are these groups being formed? Because council has lost touch and lost the trust of citizens. We can't move forward in council without where we're fighting citizens. We've got to stop that. We need to fix this and with active engagement and transparency from council. The only way for Stratford to move forward is to move forward with trust and support of our citizens. We have great opportunities in front of us. We need a leader who will be more respectful of citizens, who will bring us together. Move forward with respectful and responsible growth, make Stratford more sustainable, build more affordable housing and limit sprawl, assist citizens impacted by addiction and homelessness, ensure our growth is fed by healthy tourism industry and a strong, diverse economic base. I don't come to this race knowing all the answers, but I come with the willingness to work hard, to be honest and open with citizens, and to listen and consult broadly with and deeply to make sure decisions reflect the opinion of all of us. That's why I'm running for mayor. That's why I'm asking for your vote. I'm offering you a clear choice between the same old and the new direction, a change of culture and approach at City Hall. The other candidates for mayor have sat on the most secretive council in Canada. They missed their chance to make the change at City Hall. I ask all of you to be sure to vote and discuss the issues with your family and your friends. Get engaged, stay engaged. My name is Ritz, Robert Ritz, and I'm your clear choice for mayor of the city of Stratford. How can I help you?
Thank you, Robert. Martin Ritzma, you have 2 minutes.
So thank you, Eddie, and the Chamber for hosting this event, and thank you for being here this evening. I love to build relationships, engaging people to make decisions based on consensus. I love our community and see it through the lens of all the organization and people that I have served, organizations that I will have to leave if I'm successful. I am a forward thinker, learning from the past, but dwelling on the future. And I love to lift people up. I can lead with my heart, but still take a stance and make tough decisions. Do we have challenges in our community? Yes, we do. But our community has the care, the compassion, and the intellect to address them. Over the past few months, many have asked me, why are you doing this? And the simple answer is, I love to serve. Looking out at the people gathered here tonight, I see people that I have taught with, cried with, laughed with, shared with, volunteered with, failed with, and succeeded with, but most important, I see people who I want to serve, and I would be humbled to serve as your mayor.
Martin. And Kathy, you have 2 minutes for your wrap-up.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the Chamber for putting on this event. Thank you to all the people who came out. We're still getting used to big crowds post-pandemic, so it's lovely to see everyone. I want to talk a little bit about sort of a vision for Stratford moving forward. A vision where we can get as many people to live, work, and play here as possible. And where we make decisions, where we're always actually asking that question, does this decision make life better for the citizens of Stratford? We cannot be stuck in the past. We can't be stalled in the present. We do have to move forward into the future. And I think it has to be a vision that leaves no one behind. We are an amazing community. We've seen it time and again. We saw it when we did the Stratford Welcomes Refugees project. We've seen the United Way grow year after year. We've seen how we came together during COVID and we got through a very difficult time. And I actually think the challenges that this community has are not that great when we all start to work together on a common vision, and that's what I would like to bring. I will actually, I had a conversation at my yellow bench with a young mother who was going by with her kids in the stroller, and I said, "Hi, my name's Kathy Vasilakos. I'm running for mayor. Ask me anything in real life." And she sort of stopped, and we had an amazing conversation about her kids' school, about the secretary at the school, who everybody loves. I won't name her and embarrass her. And then the woman stopped me and said, "Thank you for stopping me." I said, "No, thank you for stopping." She goes, "No one's ever asked my opinion before." And so I think what I'd like to bring and continue as mayor is to continue that conversation, not just with the people who have the time, the energy, or the wherewithal to show up to City Hall, which can be intimidating, but I'd like to go out and actually make sure that we cover the opinions and ideas of all of the citizens of Stratford. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks to the three of you. It's been great to hear your views. All of our candidates are going to be sticking around. They're going to be going to your individual tables to answer your questions as well. Thanks to our committee, our panelists. Ella, you did a phenomenal job tonight. You had a good time doing that? Ella McCone. Nancy Orr, Ryan Erb, thank you so much. Thanks to our sponsors, the Huron Perth Association of Realtors, Scotiabank, Orr Insurance, Fahm & Company, Dunphy Burdett Lawyers. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this evening. Have a very pleasant evening. Thank you.